right, so 4 keys to a good hip hinge. Number 1 is we want our hips to dominate the movement. And so if we look from the side here, what I mean by that is everything below and above, for the most part, stays pretty static in terms of being the main mover for the exercise. So what that would look like is, right here, we're going to get a good flex in the hips. And really everything else, I mean, my knees, they're not changing from their normal beginning position. Same with the ankles and same with the back. So we really want our hips to be the main mover and dominate that movement. And the reason that's the first key in my mind is a lot of people really believe that when they do a hip hinge that they are truly just moving at the hips. And so whenever I have patients or clients and they come in and we're going through a hip hinge, most of the time they're typically not using the hips as the main mover. And so it's something that we can easily in our minds think we're doing, but in reality we're not. So kind of that feel versus real. We think we're doing it, you know, the majority of the motion with the hips, and we're really not. So the second main key is that we want to move in more of a horizontal planar direction versus vertical. So if we look from the side and we compare that to a squat, as I come down into a squat, I'm moving up and down, right? We're going in more of a vertical, kind of like a pump handle, right? Whereas a hip hinge is not so much like that. A hip hinge is more kind of a front to back, right? We're moving more this way, not up and down. So that's your second main key, is really make sure that it doesn't get too kind of pump handly, too, you know, up and down. We want to really keep it more of that main mover of the hips and really pushing the hips back in that horizontal plane. So the third key really ties in well with the second main key, and that is we want to feel a really good posterior weight shift. And so what I mean by that is through the feet, as we kind of move our way up, we're going to feel it more midfoot back to the heel. So as I start to come down into that motion or push my hips back, I'm going to feel the weight in my feet shift back, or the pressure, better said. Pressure is going to shift towards the back of the foot, the heel, midfoot area. As I do that, what else you should notice as we move up is you'll start to feel it more on the posterior chain, right? Meaning hamstrings, glutes mainly, right? That's where we really want to feel it. So as I come back, I feel my weight shift back, and then as my trunk goes down, right here I start to feel hamstrings, glutes start to really, you know, tense up, and that's where, you know, that's the whole purpose of the movement. We want to spare the knees, we want to spare the back, and we really want to put it on that posterior chain, right? Whereas a squat or some of those other movements are much more knee dominant, and it's going to get more of the front of the leg. So third key is to really make sure we get a good posterior weight shift, right? And then fourth key, which I think a lot of people overlook, but is very, very important, is the ability to really move the pelvis independently, right? Or be able to tilt it, in this case, most importantly, front to back. And so if we picture that, you know, right here I'm in quote unquote neutral, or I'm in a good starting position here where my pelvis is nice and even, imagine that there's a little water bucket here on the side, right? And as I tilt forward, that water spills forward, right? As I tilt back, that water is going to spill back. And so however you need to imagine it, the ability to independently tilt forward and back like that without getting much movement above or below is really key, and I'll explain to you why. And so as we get down towards the bottom of the hip hinge, a lot of people will be into a little bit too much of an anterior pelvic tilt, right? And so, because one of the main things that, you know, when someone's being taught how to hip hinge, is don't round the back out. So a lot of times people will overkill that, and they'll actually, you know, anterior pelvic tilt or arch the back more once they get to the bottom. The problem with that is it causes kind of a sharp low back pain on, I'd say, you know, a third to half the people who will do this movement. And so then they go, oh, well, if the whole point of me doing this movement is to spare my back, then, you know, it's really not doing me any good. So as we get to that point and we've got a little bit too much arch in the back, the ability to then drop out of it or adjust forward, backward, whatever needs to be done is really key in order to make sure the back pain is not present in the hip hinge. So quick recap, number one is we really want to make sure the hips dominate the movement. Everything below and above, for the most part, stays quiet, and we got the hips as the main mover. Number two is we really want to move in a horizontal, not a vertical. And so like we talked about, squats moving up and down, hip hinge or deadlift is more horizontal, this direction. Third thing is we want to get a good posterior weight shift. We want to get our weight back. We really want to feel it here on the posterior chain there. We don't want to have a whole lot of our weight forward. If we do, then it's going to cause problems as we move down further into the hip hinge or deadlift. And then finally, the fourth key is really make sure that we have this ability to tilt the pelvis independently forward, backward. So when we get to the bottom, we're able to adjust appropriately to make sure that we don't have a whole lot of back pain.